All right, so we are live right now. So welcome to our April meeting. I'm Erin Frigo. I'm the president of the Panhandle Archaeological Society. And tonight our speaker will be Dr. Tamra Walter, who will be talking to us about mission conception and cultural interaction on the frontier of Spanish Texas, a look ahead to the 2023 TAS Field School in Nacogdoches. Fun fact, Dr. Walter was one of my professors when I was in grad school at Texas Tech. Before I give the floor to her, though, please turn off your speakers just to minimize any interference. And also, this hasn't happened a lot, but it's happened at least once, and it was kind of weird. If you want to keep your camera on, that's fine. But like, I guess kind of just if you're just gonna like sit calmly in front of your camera, because we've had people who I guess are watching us on their phones and they just carry their phone with them from room to room to room, and that can be very, very distracting. So if you're going to be doing that, please turn your camera off. If you are doing stuff like that, I will probably turn it off for you, but I'm just kind of trying to give you a heads up here. So with that, Dr. Walter, I will give the floor to you.
Okay, so can I share my screen here?
You should be able to, yes.
Okay, I'm looking for that. Oh,
you kind of have to hover over it.
Yeah, I'm looking for it. Okay. Oh, here it is. Okay. All right. Let me make sure. Okay, is everybody seeing that?
You are good to go.
Okay, great. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be back amongst you guys, and gives me an opportunity to promote the upcoming field school. And I should preface all of this by saying that this is all very new to me. I have not worked much at all in East Texas. So I'm learning as y'all are learning. So bear with me. I mostly work in South and West Texas in terms of Spanish colonial sites. So it's really a pleasure to be able to work on some of the earliest missions in Texas, and something that I've wanted to do for a long time. So what I thought I'd do tonight was to give you an overview of the history of the site itself and talk about some of the important historical figures that are related to the site, and also talk about some of the related sites that are also important for our understanding of the history of Concepcion. Then I'm going to talk about the previous investigations that have been done here that actually help locate the site. And then we'll talk about what it is we're planning to do this summer, what our goals are, what we hope to find, so on and so forth. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, the TAS Field School this summer is going to be held in East Texas, just outside of Nacogdoches, at the site of Nuestra Señora de la Parísima Concepcion, or 41 NA 344. Now, Concepcion, for those of you who don't know, is one of the earliest Texas missions, and it was established in 1716. It remained in that location until about 1730 or so, and it was moved from that site in 1730 to another site just outside of Austin, and it was only there for a brief amount of time before it was eventually moved to its final location in San Antonio, where it is today. So the mission itself was one of 4 that was actually established during the Domingo Ramon expedition. Domingo Ramon was tasked with establishing these 4 missions along with a presidio, and all of this was taking place because they're wanting to prevent French expansion into Texas. It was right along, obviously, this area was right along the border of Spanish Texas and French Louisiana. If you look down below at the 2 maps, I'm sorry, those are so crummy, but I have a better one that I'll show you in a minute, but this is supposedly the exact route that the expedition took from San Juan Bautista, which is today in and around the area of Guerrero, Mexico, making its way across Texas all the way up into the area that is today Nacogdoches. Now, there were a number of people that were important players that were part of this expedition, and among them was Father Antonio Margel de Jesus. He is an important person for this story because he is known as the father of, or actually he's a patron saint of Texas missions. He was a big advocate for missions in East Texas, but I suspect he's more well known for founding Mission San Jose in San Antonio. And that, of course, is known as the mother of all missions in Texas. So he was a part of this expedition and along for the ride. Another important individual that was a part of this expedition was, and I'm going to butcher this name because I don't speak French, was an actual French Canadian soldier. It may surprise you, maybe not, but Louis Juchereau de Saint-Denis was that individual that was part of the expedition, and he actually served as a conductor and the quartermaster of the expedition. In addition to Saint Denis, there was also Father Francisco Hidalgo. He was also part of this expedition. He was important because he was actually not just a huge advocate for Caddo missions, and of course this is a Caddo mission, but he had actually been part of, or a member of the expedition team in the 1690s that helped to establish the Francisco de los Tejas mission in 1693 in East Texas. And they weren't there very long before the Caddo chased them off. So it's almost 20 years later that they returned. So his role in this is that he was a big advocate for this, but he also actually drafted a letter to the French governor of Louisiana asking for help to reestablish these Texas missions. In response to the letter, the governor sends him Saint Denis, sends Saint Denis to Texas, and Saint Denis travels all the way to San Juan Bautista to meet with folks regarding this expedition, and he ends up, upon his arrival, immediately being arrested for carrying foreign goods. So he's held under house arrest at Presidio San Juan Bautista, and he's kept there for a while. And during that time period, he actually starts to court the commander's daughter and eventually marries her, Manuela Sanchez. He eventually is exonerated of the charges and becomes quartermaster, and he makes the expedition with them. But there were a lot of people who thought he was a covert operative for France, and they again try to arrest him in 1716. He flees to Louisiana, where he establishes a trading outpost known as Fort Saint Jean Baptiste in Natchitoches, Louisiana. So some of you have probably heard of him, but may not know the connection to this particular site. This is just what you're looking at here is in the lower left-hand corner. That's actually a image or a illustration of that fort, that trading fort that he established. This image here just shows you the route. Again, kind of a better idea of the route that they had to take to get from Guerrero to Nacogdoches and then on to Natchitoches. This is all part of the Camino Real, but to the right, you have a map that actually shows you where those missions and the Presidio were located, just up and above Nacogdoches. You can see that on the map, I hope. I can't see it because this is blocking it, but I know it's on there. To my knowledge, Concepcion is the only one of those four that's been found, and the Presidio they are still in search of. Now, in addition to the mission sites, and I forgot to mention that another important thing about Concepcion is it was one of four, but it served as the headquarters. So it was the center of mission life for those four missions. Another important site that is critical for our understanding of this story of Concepcion is the site of Los Adayes. Los Adayes was the easternmost outpost in Spanish Texas, and it was also built in response to the French presence along the border of Spanish Texas and French Louisiana. The settlement would eventually include both a mission and a presidio, but the mission was founded first in 1717 by Domingo Ramon, who was the commander of that expedition that founded the Concepcion and related missions. So that mission didn't last very long. Actually, it was abandoned in 1719 after threats from the French. Shortly after, though, a presidio or a military fort was established, and the mission was reoccupied in 1721 during an expedition to the area under the direction of the Marquis de Aguayo. Now, another important thing to know about Los Adais is that in 1729, it became the capital of Texas, and it would stay the capital of Texas until 1772. Now, due to its isolated location from other Spanish settlements, the Spanish relied heavily on French trade in this area, more so than anywhere else. And there were restrictions on such practices, but here it was really a necessity. Restrictions on commerce between the two were relaxed by the Spanish eventually, and they needed to do that to help meet supply needs of the outposts. And this would have included sites like Concepcion. It wasn't just the French and the Spanish trading here. The Caddo and other native groups were active participants in this trade network. And this resulted in a unique array of material culture at Los Adais and nearby sites, we presume, which would include Mission Concepcion. I can tell you that after a visit to Natchitoches to look at the collection from Los Adais, I've never seen anything like it. Just the sheer volume of porcelain ceramics blew me away. I'd never seen anything like it on a colonial site before. So it's really pretty incredible when you compare that with other sites. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that this was a thriving area for trade, even though it was quote unquote illegal. So that's something to think about when we're thinking about what kinds of stuff we might find or not find at Concepcion. Now, another important person in the story of Concepcion is Governor Alarcon. Governor Alarcon led an expedition to East Texas 2 years after the mission was established in 1718 in an effort to resupply the missions. We know from historical documents that the missions were struggling. There was disease and hunger, and they just weren't doing as well as they'd hoped. So this was the whole purpose behind Alarcon's expedition in 1718. Morphy notes that upon Alarcon's arrival, he was met with gunshots from more guns of the Hasinai Caddo than the Spanish had. So this is also another thing to keep in mind when we're thinking about what kind of material culture we might encounter. And another thing to add to that is that Fray Espinosa, who was one of the missionaries that was stationed or assigned to Concepcion, when he arrived in 1716 to Mission Concepcion, or at the future location of Mission Concepcion, he noted that there were 92 guns among the Hainai at Concepcion, which far outnumbered what they had. And we know that the Spanish were not supposed to trade guns with the natives in the area. The French, however, didn't have those restrictions. So you can guess what kind of guns those were. So as I briefly mentioned, we do know that they were attempting to proselytize and missionize the Caddo, and specifically the Hainai Caddo. The Hainai were part of the Caddo Confederacy and the larger group of Hasinais of East Texas. This map here shows you the archaeological area in green of the Caddo, and the purple area points to where Concepcion is located. So it's right smack dab in the middle of all of these Caddo groups. This is a closer view of the area where the missions were established. You can see, I don't know if you can note, it's kind of on the lower right-hand corner of the map. You can see Concepcion, and above it, Nasoni. That whole area was considered part of the Hasinai area. And most of the missions in Presidio were established among the Haini, which again were part of the Hasinai. But you can see there's a lot of different groups spread across the area. Most of them in and around the Angelina River, those missions that were established in 1716. But this just gives you kind of a sense of how these sites were related to the Caddo villages that were there at that time. So what we know about the Caddo is that they were farmers. They grew corn, beans, and squash. They hunted and gathered locally, and they lived in round houses. And they also made amazing pottery. This image here just shows you just part of the collection that's at Tarl of the variety and skill of the Caddo potters. And that's a tradition that continues today. So we're obviously going to be expecting to find a lot of Caddo pottery, and there are a lot of different kinds. I'm learning, like I said, I'm not a Caddo archaeologist, but boy, am I learning a lot. And we'll be calling on Tim Perla's expertise to help us with any Caddo pottery that we recover this summer. But this just gives you a sense of the kinds of vessels that they were producing. So I want to talk about the discovery of the site itself and previous investigations. Now, most of you probably know that Dr. Tom Middlebrook has been just really essential for and so significant for finding this site and helping locate the mission itself and explaining what was going on in the area. And the one thing that I want to note about that too is that this is one of the earliest missions. It's certainly one of the earliest missions that's been found, but also it's one of the most recent lost missions found. So to my knowledge, and there are still lost missions out there that we have not been able to locate, this particular mission is the most recent lost mission that's been located. And that is largely due to Tom Middlebrook and his team. So when they were attempting to find the site, and others had tried and failed, they didn't have a lot of information to go off of. In fact, what they had were just references in historical documents that talked about where the site was located. They knew, for example, that it was at least described in some of the Spanish documents as being a half a league east of Angelina River. And it was also described as being placed atop a quote unquote mesa east of a Caddo village. And the records also indicate that it was near two springs. So with this information in hand, these guys, they started to search every and all locations that might fit these descriptions. And in May of 2010, they found what they believed to be the site. So Tom was accompanied by Morris Jackson and Georgia Avery, among others, but this is the main core of folks who actually helped to locate the site. Now, you'll see on this map here, I have 4 sites listed, and these are the sites that they located during their survey of the area. And that includes the Haini Hayfield, the Gallant site, the Belle Gallant site, and Mission Concepcion. I think, and I think that Tom would agree with this, that the Mission Concepcion and the Ben and Belle Gallant sites are really all part of the same site. It's just sort of semantics. The Ben and Belle Gallant sites are named after the landowners. It is located on private property. And to the southwest, you've got that Haini Hayfield, which is actually a Caddo village. And there's also 2 springs nearby, and the mission itself, or what we believe to be the mission, is actually kind of on top of a flat area. So it ticked a lot of boxes, but they needed to do a little more investigation to ground truth their finds. And so in addition to all the survey that they carried out, just walking around looking for possible locations, they also carried out a magnetometer survey They did do some mechanical scraping around the mission. I'm not sure about the other two sites, but I know that they did scraping around the mission area, or what they believe to be the mission area. They did a metal detector survey. They did limited excavations at all three sites, with the exception is I don't know that they did anything at the Caddo village. They determined that the deposits are pretty shallow, so particularly at the mission site. So I think that by the time you're 30 or 40 centimeters deep, you're out of the deposits, and it's easy digging. So that's great for us this summer. During those investigations, they recovered both European and native artifacts. And I'm going to talk on a little bit more detail about each of the sites and what they were finding at each one of them. I'm going to start with the Gallant site, 41 NA 338. It's the site that's the furthest north from Concepcion. So at this particular part of this, at this site, again, I still think they're all pretty much part of the mission. But at that site, they found evidence for Spanish occupation and a 19th century homestead. So you've got a collection of Spanish colonial artifacts and a 19th century domestic artifacts mostly. They conducted a magnetometer survey, and if you look at the lower right, or the photo to the far right, you'll see, I know it's kind of fuzzy, I apologize for that, but this is results of the magnetometer survey, and you can see what is clearly a circle of post holes. So what we have here is, we believe, a roundhouse. Now, interestingly, and again, this is all the work that Tom Middlebrook and his team did. So I want to make sure everybody knows I wasn't involved in this. So I'm having to borrow a lot from what he's told me. But they did some excavations around that. I think they put in a couple of 1x1s there and exposed some of those post holes. And Tom's theory is that perhaps this was Governor Alarcon's house. When the governor arrived in 1718 to Concepcion, they built him a roundhouse. And he was there for, I think, something like 18 days, so a little over 2 weeks. And the reason why he thinks it's maybe a good candidate for this, and maybe it's wishful thinking, is because they didn't find a central hearth, and they didn't find much in the way of domestic artifacts directly, any artifacts at all for that matter, in and around that structure or those test units that were placed there. So, who knows? Maybe this is Governor Alarcon's house. We want to do some more extensive excavations there to test that theory. So we plan to investigate here with some block excavations. Now, the Gallant site is the site that's just north of Concepcion, and they also found an array of artifacts that included both Spanish and native artifacts. They also found here evidence for 2 roundhouses. Now, I'll put this out there because Tom says it, and he also says that, well, it's kind of wishful thinking maybe and fanciful on my part, but we know that when Governor Alarcon came, he had an interpreter with him, and that was a woman by the name of Angelina. And Angelina was said to have had, well, actually Governor Alarcon was said to have had a house made for her when they got there. So Angelina also would have had a roundhouse and maybe another roundhouse because she had 2 sons that were with her. That's that may be a little further out than I'm willing to go, but who knows? It's kind of fun to think about. Maybe it was her house. And for those of you who don't know about Angelina and why this is important, Angelina is a very important figure in that area. Everybody in that area can tell you all about Angelina. The river was named after her. She was a young Sinai Caddo woman. She was converted to Christianity at a young age, and she was fully fluent in Spanish. So she accompanied Ramon as not just an interpreter, but also a diplomat. So she was far more than just an interpreter. And, there were stories and legends about her in the area to this day. So it would be really exciting to find something like that, but how you prove that, I don't know. But anyway, it's kind of fun to think about. So we will be conducting investigations in this area of the two roundhouses. I think the important thing to note here is those roundhouses are all separate away from that Caddo village. And I think that they are definitely associated with the mission proper. But whether or not they belong to the governor or to Angelina, I think we need to understand their relationship to the mission itself. So we're going to be investigating in those two areas with, again, block excavations. Now, the Hanai hayfield, the Caddo village site, I should say something about that, just to let folks know, because I think some people were thinking, oh, we're going to dig at a Caddo village. Well, I'm not a Caddo archaeologist, and I don't see myself becoming one in the next 6 weeks. So the hayfield site is something I said, like, I'm not qualified to dig a Caddo site. I would not feel comfortable with that. So we compromised with this and said, okay, well, it may be that the Caddo, and we're encouraging the Caddo to join us for these excavations, and they're interested. So it may be that we have someone like Bo Nelson who could oversee a small crew of Caddo and work with the Caddo, and they may be digging at the hayfield site. I don't know what's been decided about that, but anything that's done over there is not under my purview. But it may be where some excavations take place, and if you're there, I would think that there would be an opportunity for us to go over there and see what's going on. As of now, I don't plan to do anything there, and I'm not sure about the current status of what the Caddo want to do. So we'll have to wait to see on that. Oh, and the mission. Oh, I needed to say something about the mission site. The mission site, there, and I'm sorry I didn't have a better map of it here, but at the mission site itself, Middlebrook and his team identified 3 areas. There was what he believes to be a residential area, a area where the church was, and like a granary or storage area. He based that on the artifacts. There weren't, to my knowledge, any features that were found that would indicate an architectural structure. So we would like to open up large-scale block excavations there as well to see if we can't locate some evidence for some architecture there. We're just going to have to see. But that will be the third area where we'll be working. So what kind of things do we expect to find? Well, we can get a glimpse of what's there by looking at what was recovered by Middlebrook and his team. So, not surprisingly, a lot of Caddo pottery. And as I'm learning, there are a lot of different kinds of Caddo pottery, and different groups are associated with different kinds and different time periods. What we're seeing primarily here are these varieties: patent engraved, the Lindsay grooved, Spradley brushed, and there's another one that I forgot to put in here and I can't remember its name, but this is what we'll expect to find. Tom told me that they did not recover a single European sherd. All the ceramics that they recovered were Caddo, were Caddo sherds. So once someone finds some Halika or some Mexican glazed ware, it's going to be pretty exciting. But just because they didn't have any Mexican or European ceramics here doesn't mean that they didn't have other European artifacts. In fact, they had they found quite a few European artifacts, and we're going to look at that. But this is what to expect from the ceramics here, is a lot of Caddo stuff. And like I said, Tim has already agreed to help with the analysis of the ceramics. In terms of lithics, you know, we're gonna find debitage. They did find a cache of CUNY points at the Angelina site, or 41 NA 346. In addition, there were groundstone artifacts found in the residential area of the mission proper. I think you've got a pestle up top here, and towards the bottom right, part of what's probably a mano. So these are just some of the things that they found during their initial investigations. In terms of European artifacts, there were quite a few blue glass beads that were recovered. A lot of that was found at the mission site, along with some green glass, broken wine bottle glass, we suspect. They like their wine, so that's not surprising. It's pretty typical for Spanish colonial sites. And we suspect that the blue glass beads were used for trade, and probably as trinkets for hopefully enticing the Caddo into the mission. Metal. Because of the metal detector survey, they did recover quite a bit of metal, and there were several categories of metal artifacts, including clothing items, such as this metal buckle fragment and that copper shoe component, probably a part of the heel plate there. Lots of domestic items, including knife blades and knife handles. You've got a handle there, a knife handle on the left-hand side at the bottom, and at the top you've got the blades themselves, and they probably would have had a wooden or bone handle. And then in the middle, you've got your iron blades, what's left of an iron knife. And then to the right, you have a chocolate pot handle. The Spanish love their chocolate, so it's not surprising that we see these kinds of artifacts showing up at the mission. Also lots of hardware. So things like pencils and eyelets and nails and hooks and brackets. A lot of this stuff, according to Tom Middlebrook, was found in sort of the central location of the mission proper. And he thinks that this is evidence for structure, which he could be right. But I would like to ground truth all of this and open up large-scale excavations to see if we can't find some evidence, direct evidence of a structure, post holes, builder's trench, something like that. So that's a goal for this part of the site and the excavations that we hope to conduct there. Large chain. This is probably one of the larger colonial artifacts that they recovered during the initial investigations. This is chain link is pretty common at colonial sites. I saw a lot of this when I was taking pictures of colonial collections across Texas, so it's pretty common. Horse gear, not surprising. An underbit, jingle, and a bridle fragment. All of this is Spanish. And then we had some miscellaneous items that they recovered, including an iron punch and what we think is probably part of a lock. But some of the most numerous artifacts came from weapons. And if you recall, I mentioned that the Spanish took note of not just the guns themselves, but the firing of guns that the Caddo were doing as they came into the area. So here's a look at some of those gun parts. You've got parts of that, the gun cock, the frizzen, a butt plate toe, trigger guards, the lock plate there in the center, a trigger guard finial. And Tom and Morris Jackson done a lot of work identifying these pieces. And the only Spanish gun part that they could definitively identify was the Spanish vice screw. Everything else appears to be French. So I think that tells you a lot. And here are some additional fragments of gun parts. You've got the side plates, the breech plug, mainspring, frizzen spring, sear springs. And I think those at the top are part of the barrel themselves. So giving you a sense of kind of artifacts. It's kind of surprising to find these things here, but mostly French. So an interesting pattern, but really, I guess it's not unexpected. So where are we digging? Well, I've kind of already told you that, and what will we find? And you've got a sense of what we expect to be finding, and what are our goals? Well, let's talk about that briefly. Well, one of the things that I'd like to do is to expose large portions of the mission proper to identify extant architectural features. I think we can do more there. I think with the fact that they're shallow deposits, that's going to allow us to open large areas of the mission proper quickly, because we won't have to dig too deep, and hopefully we will find some evidence of buildings. Who knows? So that's really part of ground truthing, making sure that, okay, we've got something here. Next, I'd like to investigate the roundhouse at 41 NA 338 to determine if Alarcon could have resided there, or really more importantly, I just want to know, how is this site related to the mission, and what kinds of things can we learn from the material culture that's coming out of there? Really, it's the same goal for NA 346, or the quote unquote Angelina site. I want to investigate both roundhouses there and the associated material culture to determine its function and whether or not there's any way to link it to Angelina. Again, I think that's far-fetched, but hey, it's fun to dream. And I think that's probably where we will place the kids units. That's what I'm thinking about right now. But either way, we will have block excavations there, just like we will at the mission proper and at NA 338. I also want to assess the degree of cultural interaction and exchange through the material culture recovered from all three sites. I think looking at the types of artifacts that are present at this site, at all three of these sites, are going to be very interesting. It's going to tell us a lot about trade, about access to guns, about illicit activities, reliance on native goods versus European goods, who's there, who's not. So that's going to be something that I think is going to be a very interesting part of the process. And a lot of that is going to probably be done after we're out of the field. But those are the goals for this summer. As I said, we'll probably open two large excavation blocks in both of the roundhouse sites, quote unquote, and probably 3 to 4 large scale block excavations at the mission itself. And who knows where that will lead. As always, with any TAS field school, we never know what we're going to find. So it's always good to be flexible. But this gives you a sense of what to expect, what we're hoping to be able to achieve, and what we might be finding. Oh, I forgot to mention. Oh, I'm getting ahead of myself. Well, I wrote all this here about the features. So it's not just artifacts, but obviously we anticipate that we're probably going to run into a lot of post holes. And for those of you who've never seen a post hole or excavated one, I'm going to show you a picture of some post holes. Just a reminder of what these roundhouses look like. You can see them being built, and you can see the posts in the background. And this is what it looks like archaeologically when you expose those. I think this is the George C. Davis site. I'm not sure. But anyway, this is what a roundhouse, what the remains of a roundhouse looks like in the archaeological record. So I suspect that we'll be encountering a lot of post holes in addition to finding native and European material culture. So Caddo pottery, lithic debitage, European pottery, fingers crossed. It would be really cool if you're the first person to find it. As of now, they have not found any European wares, lots of Caddo stuff, but obviously there's lots of metal and glass. So that's likely what the material cultural profile there is going to look like. This is a view of the mission. It's you can see the marker that was, they actually, once they found it, they moved this marker from its original location or where it was placed, where they thought the mission was, and it was moved. Tom got permission to have it moved, and it sits right in front of the mission itself. So you kind of get a sense. This picture was taken in the fall. So you can see that shaded. All those 3 sites have good shade. So that's another good reason to come out and join us this summer. I hope you're excited as I am to be working at such a cool site. I think we're going to have some exciting archaeology. In addition to the excavations, there'll also be survey. And maybe we'll have some work being done at that Caddo village. So with that, I really do hope to see all of you there, but I'm happy to entertain any questions that you might have. So
I actually had a quick question for you. I mean, I assume it's open for registration right now.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
do you have like flyers and stuff ready to go?
I don't have flyers.
Okay.
But
okay.
you've got James. I mean,
okay.
You can go online and
Yeah.
register. You can also show up and register the day that you want to start. That can happen
Okay.
too. So
Yeah, but I would send them to the website. There's a lot of good
Yes.
information on the TAS website.
that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
That was all I had.
that was easy.
Well, I'd just like to thank you. That was an excellent presentation. I have a real good understanding of what's out there now. And my question is, what was the maximum Spanish occupation during the mission period there? How many Spaniards were on site, do you think?
At these missions, there were never many.
I didn't think so, but
You know, you get a handful of priests, and a soldier or 2 with their families are usually stationed there.
mhm,
So maybe a dozen at the most.
mhm.
That's just how it was. And honestly, they just weren't very successful. The cattle really had no need for them. So they could farm on their own. What did they need the Spanish for? So yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Oh.
That was easy.
No, I think Scott has one. He turned it off.
Okay.
He turned off his mic.
Okay.
No, I was just going to say thanks, Tamra, for
Oh, you're
coming and
welcome.
giving an excellent presentation. And you're such a trooper too. How many TAS field schools have you done?
4, 5. Hold on, I'm thinking now. If you count Espiritu Santo, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This will be number 8.
Yeah, that's got to be some kind of a record.
Yeah.
You're a very patient woman.
I think I'm mentally ill. That's actually there's something wrong with me. But
And
actually, I love the TAS, and I love these field schools, so it's good for me. So
well, and to do it while you're president, that's really crazy.
don't remind me. Don't remind me.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see what kind of trade goods you guys get and see what how many French goods are there, and it's really, really interesting to me in terms of seeing what you see at the mission versus what you see around the surrounding sites and potentially at the Caddo village if you guys do work there.
Yeah, I mean, really, it is fascinating how different that is. I mean, you talk about Los Adais is really isolated, Concepcion is isolated, but so was San Sabah. But the material culture in some ways is so different. And then you see items that I just dumbfounds me. I can't believe that, we found, there's a cufflink with a thistle in it that we found at San Saba. They have another one almost identical to it at Los Dice. And it's just crazy things like that. So it's just wild to see these collections. And there, like I said, I'm a newbie to this, to see the kinds of things that are coming out of there is really cool. So I'm excited to see too. It'll be really interesting to be able to compare that to other areas.
So you mentioned about kind of the Spanish bending the rules.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, so how important do you think like the horse trade was, like not toward the west, but the horse trade back to the east to French Louisiana, as well as like the deer hide trade?
I think it was pretty critical. Of course, like I said, I'm still learning here, but I think that that's something that deserves more attention.
So I know with like Juan Sabiata, he was like playing both sides a little later than this. Do you think the Caddo potentially were doing the same thing to their benefit?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. That's my understanding. Yeah. They benefited in any and every way that they could.
Right. Well, if there are no more questions, thank you so much, Dr. Walter. That was a great presentation, and hopefully some of us will see you this summer.
Yeah, I hope to see you all there. It's going to be a great summer. Thank you again. I appreciate the opportunity to promote the field school.
Yes,
Thank you,
thank you.
Tamra.